Now, I hope I don't get sued by Universal, but I'm going to tell you right now, I know the most rapacious exponent of artist abuse are the major record companies. By far. They steal, it's terrible. What they do is corrupt.
There are two worlds in music, the art and the business. One can create meaning, the other can create victims. My guest today has picked a side, fighting for the artist.
I was determined not to own the artist masters. So my lawyer begged me to do it normally, but I just wouldn't.
He founded Artists House, a legendary independent label that gave creative freedom to titans like Ornette Coleman, Chet Baker, and Paul Desmond. It put him at the deathbed of the man who discovered Dylan and Springsteen, John Hammond, who in his final moments passed on a sacred trust.
So I got right up to his bed. He grabs me by the arm and he says, "It's up to you now."
Over a 5-decade career, that philosophy has led to more than 300 albums, over 35 Grammy nominations, and collaborations with a staggering list of legends. From Stevie Wonder and Eric Clapton to Paul Simon, Etta James, and Peggy Lee, and a who's who of jazz and blues greats. Today, John Snyder shares a lifetime of wisdom on the art of music, the realities of the business, and why your copyright is your sword and shield. I'm Vaughn Veneer, and this is Beyond the Notes. John, welcome to the show. So one thing that is incredibly inspiring for me about you is just your level of entrepreneurship around the board throughout your life. How does one come to found a record label that, within only 5 years does records with, numerous legendary jazz musicians? What was that process like for you, and how did that come to happen?
I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. In fact, when I got fired by Amit, I've been fired by some pretty big people. But anyway, Ahmet Ertegun was the godfather in the 80s of the music business. I went to George Wayne, who was one of the older guys that took me under their wings. I always got along with the older guys, and they saw in me a future. So John Hammond was a mentor to me, and he discovered everybody from Benny Goodman and Billie Holiday to Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan. And he took, and so many. He was a great man. And so who am I to be respected by a great man? That's happened before with Herb and Lester Koenig, some others, just amazing people. And I was just of a generation, and they wanted to tell me everything they could, because they, just like now, I want to tell everything I can, because you want people to keep going with it, and don't make the same mistakes you made. And I went to him and I said, I don't know what to do, George. Be an entrepreneur. And I said, what in the hell is that? And he said, run your own business. I said, George, I'm just looking for a job, man. I got to pay the rent. He said, I'm telling you, this is the way to go. And so I kept trying for the other way. And then finally it hit me. You are a record producer. You don't need to be looking for a gig. You got a gig. So go produce a record. And then okay. So I started thinking about just matching up artists with labels. You could see what was happening and who was available, and you just put yourself in the middle of it, and that worked. And then the CD revolution came along like right away after I left Atlantic, and that just fueled everything. Nobody knew how to do that. In the sense there were no rules, and so I didn't. And when the guy asked me to do it, I said, I got nothing about that. And he said, I'll teach you. Come down. So he did at RCA, and we were making lots of money soon after that. And then I started making new records. And so the entrepreneur thing came from not being an entrepreneur. If I was better, I would have stayed in business. And since I didn't, I became independent. Now I'm working for 5 different companies. So that was way better for me.
Yeah. So what was the process like in particular? Was it through a network of connections, but how did you meet all the legendary musicians who you worked with and produced with over your career?
New York, baby. I wanted to go to New York from the time I was 10 years old. And it was like, I don't know why, but even at night, when I'd pick up a radio station from New York, because 50,000 watts, and you could hear this jazz music, and I was just thrilled with that. And then the TV came along. They were TVs when I was a kid, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But then there was this show called The Naked City, and it was a detective show, and they had this vision of New York City from
Mhm.
above with all the lights. I said, "That's it. That's it." I was only 10, and so that's somehow I finally got there when I was 18 to visit, and then it just confirmed it. And, so I didn't it's not like didn't wasn't a drive, it just was well, I mean, when I was looking for a job, I'm not gonna look in Durham, I'm not gonna look in Charlotte, I'm gonna
Yeah.
look in New York. And so
Mhm.
because I looked at all those other things, so that I wanted to go to New York, and so I was lucky, very, very lucky. And then you go there with and, you gotta be generous to people and respect people and don't take an attitude. And I certainly had nothing to take an attitude about it. I wasn't anything great or anything. I was just a hard worker, really. And,
Mhm.
so that's the key to it. I would say that'd be my key to success is just I would work harder than you.
Mhm. Hmm. Is there ever a record that you think, never got its due, but you thought, was still perfect or incredible? Mhm.
Well, I was a friend of Jerry Wexler's who produced Aretha and Ray Charles and all that. He said, "I produced hundreds of legendary records that no one ever heard." So I was like, "That's just what happens, man." It's like, I don't hate any of my records. There's a couple I'm not totally thrilled about, but, I made 300 or so new records with probably 10 or I mean, it's, how many companies? 10 major companies and a lot of other people. And, all those reissues, CD reissues and compilations, working on Elvis and Aretha and all that. You get to know people, and, if your reputation is important, if your trust is hard to get, easy to lose, and impossible to get back, so
Hmm.
don't mess with it. You
Mhm.
just don't mess with it, and so, I learned that pretty early on, and, I was an observant person and also always went further than what people asked me to do, and, it's like, you asked me to leave, I'm gonna sweep the floor. I mean, it's just like, I'm not gonna stop, and, uh, I think that makes a big difference, but the artists are when I first met Ron Carter, who played with Miles Davis, and scared me to death, seeing him walk down the hall, and now I have to take his test pressing, his new record, back in LP days, and we have to go to the listening room and play his record for him, and I'm on my 2nd day at the job. I'm scared to death. I was pretty sure I was gonna wet my pants, but I did might have managed to escape that, but he was so generous to me, and I even mispronounced the name of the song Django, starts with a D, and I'm an idiot, so I'd said Django, and he
Mhm.
when I knew I was wrong right off the bat, and I thought he was gonna punch me, but he actually said, we call it Django." And that was it, and he's still my friend to this day. He's 86 or something. We've known each other for 50 years, longer than that, 52 years, and, that came from that, and then I worked with him on many records and helped him with his books and all this, so, that's how it works. You you
Mhm.
you help people out. You look out for what they need. You don't have to wait to them for to ask you, you can see it. So pay attention and care about it.
Yeah. So obviously, you've fought really, really hard throughout your career for artists and to help them and protect them in different circumstances. So do you ever remember a time or the very first time when someone was in trouble or got screwed and you knew you had to step in?
There's several of those. The biggest one was Ornette. My mentor, producer at A&M was Ed Michelle, and he was actually the guy that was up for the job, and he knew more, he was smarter, but I was prettier, and, so I got the gig, and I had the law degree. I'm not stupid, so I just hired him, and, it was the first thing I did. And so he taught me, and, he's still around, he's hanging in there, and, but, he introduced me to all these people and also to Charlie, who's a bit of a unusual person, but he wanted to do these duet records, and he had played in Ornette's band, and so we got Ornette, and I picked Ornette up at the airport, and when he came in, I mean, that's a long story, but, we got to be friends, and he kinda latched on to me because I was eager, and I also was worked, and I was kinda smart, and I'm a lawyer, and so, he had so many legal problems. As soon as I got to know him, it was almost like, "Oh my god," and, so I was able to help him save his lot from he was gonna lose it because of various reasons, and I went to court and got a 30-day they were coming to get it, man,
Mhm.
and, we got to be friends, and he taught me a lot. He taught me I'm not the same person, because he changed everything, and, that was difficult, and then we had to sell the place, and then I had to get him a place to live, and then I got him a tour of Europe, and then that was with Kafleur. I mean, it's like it was but we got it, we did it. I ended up losing a ton of money, but whatever, and, you know, I was helping him get his life together. He was a great artist who was not being treated that way. I mean, it was phenomenal to me. Even the racism alone was, like, overwhelming, and I saw it personally because I was a white guy in a black community, and so I saw it, and it was like, "Whoa, man, this is deep." And, I helped Ornette, as much as I could, and then when I went out of business, I lost track, but we got back in touch over the years, and, I still have some amazing music of his that's never been heard, that I hope to share with people someday. And then I helped Chet Baker was was always in trouble, and, others, but
How cool. How amazing that you saved many of these musicians from.
I don't know about saving, but, with Chet, it was almost like, how do you get him to stop? And, and you can't tell him. I mean, you just can't do that. That is not what works. You shouldn't do that. You can't say that's not gonna get it done. So, what gets it done? Refocus, but even that didn't work. And so, if you focus on this, maybe you're not so interested in that. And, so how do you and sometimes they just have to get over it. They have to choose to stop, and either you do or it will get you. And so it's happened both ways. I've seen it happen both ways.
Yeah. Are there any particular sort of aspects of copyright law that a lot of artists miss until it's too late, or even certain types of scams in the music industry that victimize a lot of musicians that you tell especially young artists and composers to look out for?
Most rapacious um, exponent of artist abuse are the major record companies by far. They steal. It's terrible. Now, I hope I don't get sued by Universal, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I know. And so what they do is corrupt. And so this is true for all the major companies. Now, since they've left the mafia world, but they're still doing the same practices. And the people who work there are not bad people, but I can tell you the system is corrupt. And so just the way things are computed, the way mistakes happen or made to happen, it's all kinds of little things. And the contracts themselves are right there in front of your face proof that you're going to get ripped off. And if you show an artist contract from my period to any attorney that has contract experience, they're going to say this is a one-sided contract. It's probably not even enforceable because it's
Mm.
so bad. But
Mhm.
that's that. Now, in today's world, you got to watch out if you license a beat online because you got to read that license, and you cannot click I agree unless you know what you're agreeing to. And if you do that, if you don't know, you're going to get burned. I mean, even when you sign up to Google, you're going to read a 50-page all-capped agreement on you agree to what?
Mhm.
It's inconceivable you could ever know that. Cannot know that. I had the law school kids here at the clinic a couple years ago. Right. Read all those documents, read all the Facebook, read all the agree documents. When you click I agree, what did you just agree to? Because nobody reads that crap. And so that's important. If you put your stuff, if you have original music and you put it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you
Mhm.
let them use it. Now you've given them the right to use your work for whatever reason, whenever, or for whatever, and no money. So why would you do that? For the exposure, I guess, or you want to be a celebrity, so you don't care about that. But if you're trying to make a living at it, you might just put up a bit of it or a snippet of it and draw people to your site. Try to use the social media sites to host your stuff. And then, you're not going to make any money from streaming. I'm sorry. Recorded music is a dead issue for revenue unless you're Universal Music. And so unless you have some really unusual, streaming numbers, you're not going to make any money. I don't make any money on streaming, and it's because any money that is made is going against a recoupment that's open since the 1990s. They haven't recouped. Now,
Mhm.
they only paid me 10 grand or whatever. You can't recoup on this record that sold 200,000 copies, been streamed 12 million times. That doesn't pay me anything. There's your
Mhm.
major record company for you. So, and
Yeah.
that's also true for you, the artist. So you have to find some other way. You have to use that availability of your music to get you something else. And what is that something else? Live music. So the number one revenue source right now today by far is live music. Then there's labels and then there's publishing. And
Mhm.
so I forget the numbers. They're big, 80 billion, 60 billion, 40 billion. And so, you have to drive people to your shows. And so then you can make some money because you can sell merch and this and that. But that's an
Mhm.
all big business and hard to do. And most people that are like you or me, are driving a car to the next gig and sleeping on somebody's couch. I mean, it's like it's a hard road to go. But
Mhm.
you do it because you have to do it. But at some point, maybe you get married or you have kids or you have something else. Now you got to do something different. And as soon as you owe money, you're going to have to get a job. So it's a thing. It's a trick almost. And but you got to figure a way to deal with it. And that's why you can be a weekend warrior, or you can be a teacher of the music, or you could share it with whomever. And
Was
you
there ever oh,
now
was
go
there
ahead.
ever a scam in the music world that was just that you witnessed that was so enormous that it was just almost impressive or entertaining?
Well, I mean, back in the day, all kinds of shenanigans. I mean, there was one label, I can name the guy's name. He had his own record. He had his own pressing plant. So he had powered his own records. And then if you worked at a certain record company that used to have hits located in Detroit, and you were the promotion guy, and you wanted to get paid, they'd open up their trunk of their car and say, "Take what you want." And now you're taking LP boxes that you're going to take down to the local store and dump for a buck each or whatever. And the artist doesn't get paid. Nobody gets paid, and you don't get paid. So it's like that becomes the the money, the exchanges and the LPs. The day my records came out in Atlantic, the Tuesday, every record came out on the Tuesdays. A friend of mine in the village called me. This is in New York, and he says your records are already cutouts in this record store, the biggest jazz store. I said no, and so he said, yeah, man, $1.98. I said, bring him to me. So he brought him to me. This is the day of the release. And so there it is, cut out $1.98. So I take him to the vice president, who ended up running Epic Records and signing Michael Jackson. So he was a big dude. I put him on his desk. I said, David, what is this? He picked him up and handed him back to me. He said, pretend you never saw that, John. I said, I don't think I can do that, David. He said, yeah, you can. Like, shoot me out of his office. About 3 years later, all those distribution guys were busted, all those promotion guys. So it's like, it's just there's an acceptable level of fraud,
Yeah.
and it's pretty high. So now these days, it's hard to, with all the things have digital tags, it's a little more difficult. But if you can see if you're getting paid on 0.0053, I mean, I got a royalty statement recently, and the royalty was stated in the 10,000ths of a
Mhm.
penny.
Wow.
So I called the record company. I said, 10,000ths of a penny. It's going to take me 10,000 of these to make one penny. Are you serious? He said, man, it's just this one of those things. Okay, I'm cool. I like the story. The story is better than the penny, so that's just cool. But, anyway, you gotta watch out for those things. So other platforms are not transparent, and manufacturing costs were the biggest scam of all because that's when you could sell records and not get paid. I mean, the record company could dump them. So the old school was you buy 10, you get 13, and then they didn't pay on those 3 because they were promotional use. Bull. And so the publishers all caught on to that racket in the '70s and said, "You can cheat them, but you can't cheat us. If you don't pay us on every record, we're not gonna give you any mechanical licenses," which is what you need to put the songs on the record. So it's an interesting development. The market kind of is supposedly keeping itself in check. Now, we
Mhm.
all know that doesn't work very precisely, but there is a market that is a buyer-seller market, so it does move. But, and this record business is pretty corrupt. So
Mhm.
watch out what you want when you make a record deal. Label kids often think they will. I asked one of the kids that got him to be famous. I said, "What do you want from this deal?" They were flying him up to see Jimmy Iovine and them while he was still a student in a
Mhm.
private plane. And so I said, "What do you want when you get up there?" And he said, "Promotion and creative control, marketing and creative control." I said, "You're not getting either one of those." And so I can even tell you what they're going to tell you when you say you want it. So why don't you just experience it for yourself? But here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna say, "I want creative control." And they're gonna say, "Now, Gerald, if we're gonna put a couple $1,000,000 into you, we ought to have something to say about the product. It's only logical. Wouldn't you agree?" I mean, so maybe we could have mutual, approval, which is no such thing as that. And you give in. If you give
Mhm.
in, they got you. And then, by the way, if they don't like what you did, they'll send you back until you pay for it. So it's
Mhm.
kinda like you're making a deal with the devil. So make sure you get what you want out of it. And if you
Mhm.
think of it as a service organization rather than a plantation owner, you'd be better off because they think
Mhm.
of it as plantation owner. You gotta think of it as service. They're providing you a service. And if you're not happy with that service, you shouldn't let them share your revenue. If you
Yeah.
don't have that attitude, you're gonna get ripped off. So
Mhm.
that's it. You gotta
Mhm.
know what you want. And that's what he did. And I said, if you stand up and say, if they say, you say, this is a deal breaker. Thank you. Stand up. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Good luck to you. And you leave the room, they'll never forget you. If you agree, they'll never remember you. I mean,
Mhm.
they won't. You'll be nobody. You'll be done in a year or two. So, stand up for yourself and go get the fans. They want what you got, and you want something back for it, but you're not willing to give up everything you got. So
Mhm.
and you get nothing back. You don't get they don't have to put up your record if they don't want to. Come on, man. It's your stuff. You created it. You have the rights. You're transferring your rights to them. And that's what
Yeah.
they don't understand. Record company contracts are ridiculous because you're selling your house to them and letting them write the contract for the sale of your house. Now, if you have a house and you're going to sell your house, fine. Are you going to let somebody, the buyer, write the contract for the sale of your house? No. Well, why would you do that with your song and your records then?
Mhm.
Let them write the contract? Who you think's gonna win?
Mhm. Hmm.
So, you don't have to be the genius to figure out how to deal with a business. You just have to be smart enough to know that there is one and
Mhm.
that it's not transparent. So now
Mhm.
you've gotta find out who you can trust, and
Mhm.
that person may stick with you for the rest of your life. Jerry Moss and Herb Alpert had a handshake deal and never had a contract and ran a record company for 50 years, and both became very wealthy and philanthropic because of
Mhm.
it.
Right.
That's how it works. And so in this world that we're living in where liability is everything, risk management is everything, it's
Mhm.
hard to trust. So the name of the game is not to trust. You can't build it on trust because you can't rely on trust.
Mhm.
Well, no, you kind of have a problem with that. I mean, that's what is it? Amoral? Anyway, so yeah, watch out for your business. And if you don't know what you're signing, don't sign it.
Yeah.
And also, if you're transferring your property, try to be the person who's transferring. Now, you can't afford a lawyer to write that contract. You can't even afford a lawyer, not you personally, but you can afford a lawyer to defend it, to respond to it. But
Mhm.
anytime that you're responding to a contract, it's their game. So, you gotta play that game. And musicians are not used to being, ca- you know, cynical and canny about stuff. They're trusting. And so they're perfectly primed to be taken advantage of, and it
Mhm.
really pisses me off when I see that happen. So,
Yeah,
that ain't gonna happen. I went to
right. So
Loyola to change the way people thought about it, to change
mhm.
the way the artists thought about their business, not to change the record business. So it worked. I mean, that it did change. There's a lot more opportunities for the independent artists. In fact, you don't need anybody. You don't need anybody. You can do it yourself. You go directly to thanks to the internet, and it's highly scalable. You get 1, you get 2, but it starts with 1. Don't shoot for the moon, shoot for the guy sitting next to you.
So throughout your career, you've been sort of in the front row seat to greatness. You've worked with so many incredible people, and like Ornette Coleman and Dave Brubeck. You've watched everything from Derek Trucks' sort of quiet command to Bobby Short's really magical presence. So, what do you think makes their performances in those moments really great, and what have those moments throughout your career taught you as a person and a musician and a producer?
Bobby was interesting because he was, the entertainer for the elite. It sang at the Cafe Carlisle. You couldn't get out of there without paying for $3 or $4 per person, and so it's not for everybody. And you're dressed, and it's kind of a thing. And so Bobby, uh, it's odd. I met him when my first year in New York, just by accident. His publisher came to see me at CTI in official roles, and he asked me if I'd ever heard of Bobby Short, and I said, "Well, yeah, actually I have, because my mentor made me listen to that music, which wasn't my favorite." And but he made me understand it's a song. Listen to the song. Okay, okay. And so anyway, I got to meet Bobby, and then when I later got to know him years later, producing him, got a lot of Grammy nominations with Bobby. I'd go to the Cafe Carlisle a lot, and I recorded him there a lot. And I noticed that he'd give the very same set. At the last set, there might be 3 couples in the audience. He gave the same set. He didn't back off an inch, not one thing. He made his eyes sparkle like he used to do, like he always did. He did the whole thing, and I was amazed at that. I was stunned because I'd been with a lot of bands who didn't approach their craft in the same way, where I'm giving it. There is no holding back because everybody can hold back. And so it's like, and I asked Ron Carter one time, I said, "Do you play the same way in every record?" He said, "No." I said, "What do you mean, no? Don't you have an obligation to the quarter note or something?" And he said, "I got that. But if you want everything I got to give it to you, and you got to earn it." I said, "Well, but so, what about me? When I ask you to, do you produce for me? You work for me?" And he said, "Yeah, I give you a break." So, but Bobby didn't wasn't like that. Bobby gave it up. And I think Derek is like that. The thing about Derek is he was so absorbent. As a 12-year, 10, 11-year-old on the road, he got educated on the road. And,
Mm.
but he actually called me one time. I started working with him when he was 15. He was 16 on the road. And he called me. He said, "Man, could you hit me to Plato?" And I said, "What? Can you go practice or something?" And he said, "No, I mean, I just want to know." And I said, "Okay." So I sent him Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy. And then he read it and he called me, "Okay, what next?" so, so he's that. And he listens to all kinds of music, and he respects all musicians. He's got that hippie vibe, that of love and peace. And it works for him and Susan and the band, I think. It's hard to keep a band on the road, but they've done that. And so I admire that. Um, but I mean, I'm so lucky. To stand next to Stevie Wonder in a vocal booth, and he's doing his thing. It's like, what? Somebody tell me what had that happen. Why am I here?
Mm.
Paul Simon, the same way. Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton was very generous. His people were a little bit of a pain in the ass, but we got over it. That's another story. But it's to be standing in the same room with Gay Mouth Brown, who's a decent player, great performer, and Eric Clapton. just the three of us, and they want to play a song together, and I can just sit there right between them. It's like, oh man. Or I'm sitting
Mhm.
behind David Brubeck, a whole different thing, and I'm watching him play on the solo record we're doing, and after he finishes the song, he turns to me and says, "How was that?"
Mhm.
Uh, that sucked, Dave. I mean, you got to have something to say about that. And so, but the fact that somebody on that stature, you have to raise your game. You
Mhm.
have to raise your game. And so when people cause you to raise your game and you know when you're doing it, you want to hang out with them.
Mhm.
That's who you want your friends to be. Is somebody who makes you better, who causes you to want to do something that you haven't done, that
Yeah.
almost requires it if you want to have a conversation. Same with
Mhm.
Paul. When he finishes a vocal, how was that? Man, you can't say, "Well, come check it out," or you can say all those things, but you might actually say something, and it's true. And then he hears it, and now we're friends. I mean, that's how I used to make records. When I didn't know the guy, and that usually didn't happen, but if I didn't know them, and I would listen to what they were doing, setting up and rehearsing, just playing, very carefully, because I'm here in the booth. I can hear everything, and I find something that they do is really cool, and I go up to them one on one, and I compliment them on it. I said, "That what you did in that fill right there between the blah blah, that
Mhm.
was so cool." And oh yeah, thank you, man. I got that from so and so, And now you got a conversation. And so in the date, when you hear something you think would be cool, you could actually suggest it, and they're not going to take offense. They
Yeah.
go, "Oh, yeah, maybe that's cool. I would do that." That you create the trust by being respectful. And I am honored to be in the room of so much talent. Can you imagine sitting in the studios in LA with all these studio guys who played with everybody? Man, you got to bring it. You got no choice. And so you will. You will rise to the occasion.
Mhm. So it sounds like confidence is key as part of, being
It's
a
encouragement.
musician.
The confidence comes from encouragement. It's not like an ego thing. It's the experiential thing. And also a humility thing where you don't know, but and so you're willing to engage in that and you're not afraid. It's less confidence than it is less fear. And so a lot of us are insecure. And so it's kind of hard to overcome that when you're facing somebody who seems so solid. But I got news for you. They're just as insecure as you are in some sense. And so they're humans. So if you're acting in a human way, you're not aware of it. If you're acting in a way that you're trying to act, it's a little bit less authentic and a little more prone to mistake. So just be you.
Yeah. Well, it's custom to end the podcast with some discussion about your mentors. And so I'm curious, who was Lindorf Crouch and what did he mean to you? What did he teach you and how did he shape you as a
Well,
person?
we've all had great teachers, and we all can remember them. And I was fortunate to have a number of them. In fact, I can pretty much remember all my teachers from first grade and name them. and but and then the music teachers, especially, you're close to because it's such a personal relationship. Even if it's just the band director or the orchestra director, because what you're doing is all you, and you got so much invested in it, and how they deal with that means everything. It can be the difference between squashing you and killing your thought, or raising you up and setting you free. And so that's the power of a teacher, and it's extremely powerful. So when you get those guys, and so I had a high school orchestra director, Mr. Mims, who was great to me. I had a high school trumpet teacher who was great to me, who encouraged me. And then I came to college and met Len Crouch, who was a teacher. He was a graduate assistant, and uh, I really was fascinated by his classes on education because he seemed to be different from the other teachers, which he was. And so we got to be friends, and he took a liking to me and saw something in me. And so he spent time with me. He taught me about opera. He taught me about literature, poetry. Um, I mean, he pounded it. I listened to all the Texaco opera hours on
Mhm.
Saturday. You know, it's not something I would have done on my own, but I'm so glad that I did it. And also, he was a Latin guy, so and I studied Latin in high school, so that was a big thing. The Latin, how Latin is used in word formulations and all that. Etymology became a thing. So, he kind of set me free in that thought process, and also encouraging me, you should go to Harvard, you should be president, you should do this. I said, well, don't be ridiculous. And so, but then it may not be that, but it's something else. There's something else to aspire to. So and then, and you know what, in New York, I met some of the great men of the record business. This is like second or third generation from the very beginning of the record business. John Hammond worked for William Paley. I mean, that goes way back. And John Hammond was something. And so for a guy like that, I mean, that you have to live up to it. When he was dying, I went to see him, and he made me come up to his bed, and because we were talking politics, because that's what he liked to talk about, and I had to leave. His nurses were telling me I had to go, and so Mr. Hammond, I have to leave now, and I stood up, and he come over here, so I stepped up, and he said, no, come closer. I kept, John, come up to my bed, will you? And so I got right up to his bed. He grabs me by the arm and he said, it's up to you now. And I walked home from there to New York thinking, I cannot do that. I cannot do that. That is not me. I cannot do that. But he just said it. He just said, what do I, no. So when somebody does that to you, it's cold water in the face. It's like, you got to come on with it. And so, I wasn't him. I couldn't do what he did, but I could do what I did. And so I learned that from him. I also learned that from Ornette because I could play trumpet, but I wasn't a great musician. And but he made me realize that it wasn't about that. It was about the expression, the feeling. And I mean, when I played with him, man, you got a good sound. You could do something with that. He said, you should go on the road. I'll write some music. Charles Mangus and Cecil will Cecil, we'll all write music for you. And I said, and it's a little bit unrealistic, but so I had kids and all that. But anyway, it made me feel like I could. And so that's what you want that's what we are drawn to in our mentors, and that's what we want to do with other people. And so the whole idea of learning is you're either learning or teaching. So, and it's one or the other. The roles like this.
Right.
I'll
Well,
always
John,
be
thank you
preaching.
so much. It's been truly an honor to speak to you today. I'm so glad to have learned about more about your career and your path, but also really all of your wisdom that you've had to share, be it about performance or just about the music industry in general, or just about what it means to be a musician fundamentally. So thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.